I would like to go through quickly what I think of as the 5 most important lessons that you can have in communing with Source. As you approach Source, whether you call it prayer, meditation, as you approach Source, it is important for you to understand first and foremost, and this is one of the most difficult and most easily open to misinterpretation, as Abraham says, if there's nothing you can do about it, then it's not about you. Again, if there's nothing you can do about it, then it's not about you. Now, you watch the news, and an event that has already taken place, there's nothing you can do about it, is there? Then it's not about you. Now, the reason I say this, and I don't want you to misinterpret this, is this. Hawkins speaks over and over in Power versus Force about force always creating a counterforce. When you see an event take place that is a train being blown up and 197 people are killed in Spain, or yesterday 31 more people killed over there, 10 more soldiers over there the day before, people blowing themselves up, blowing their children up to make a... When you see this kind of stuff, what does it make you feel? You feel bad, don't you? When you feel bad, you attract the energy of what it is that you are feeling. Like it or not, you will get whatever you think about, you will get. Whether you want it or not, you will get it. Whatever you're thinking about. So if you're thinking about how much you hate the people in the world who would do such despicable things, and you fill yourself with the same energy that they are sending to you, you have now magnified the amount of low energy in the world. It is incumbent upon you, if you're approaching Source, to say, I intend to feel good, meaning I intend to feel God at any moment. And if enough of us were to collectively reach that critical mass where we say, I refuse to be depressed, I refuse to be upset, I refuse to be in a state of anger and terror because there is that in the world. Instead, I intend to feel good. If enough of us do it and we reach a critical mass, they'll stop reporting it. The second of these, and I think this is probably the most important in terms of your own personal lives, is to remember that God, Source, cannot be anything other than what it is. It can't be what it isn't. Now, what is it? It is abundance. It is well-being. Let's just take those two. It's many other things. It's non-exclusion. Now you come to it with a thought that is not of God. That thought is, I have scarcity in my life. And that thought is, I have illness in my life. So now you get down on your knees and you say, please heal me of my illness. And you say, please send me my abundance, my money, whatever it is, because I've got scarcity. But now, this Source, which can only be what it is, how can it recognize what it isn't? Listen to these words from the Course. Because your idea is not of God, God does not respond to it. To respond to it would give it reality. If God were to respond to anything other than the idea of perfect oneness, there would no longer be perfect oneness. Does that make sense? So, you can't go to God and ask God, which is perfect abundance, to replace your scarcity because it doesn't know anything about scarcity. And you can't ask it to heal you because it knows nothing about illness, because it is nothing but well-being. All of our illnesses, all of them, are collectively from generations upon eons of egos that have convinced themselves that they're not living in a state of perfect health, regardless. And death is not even entered into it, because death is not a punishment. It's not even a reflection of illness. It is just all that composes, decomposes. And you just return, take off. Third, Source, and returning to Source, and gaining the power of the Source and the power of intention is not about learning something new. You're not going to get it here. You're not going to get it in books and tapes and so on. You might get some clues, but you're not going to get it that way. It's about remembering. It's about remembering. The ego is the part of you that's separated from Source and believes in its separation, and also believes in all that it owns and all that it does and all that its reputation reflects. But you must learn to remember. All of it is illusion. You have a choice of finding your way through the veils of forgetfulness back to where you belong. It's about remembering. When you're struggling, remember. When you're sick, remember you are well-being. And reach for a thought that is in harmony with well-being. Fourth, Source knows. Don't ever assume that Source forgets. Every dog, every cat, every raccoon every rat, every animal that has fur on it, when winter comes, even before winter gets here, even when it's still fall and still summer, what happens to your horse and to your dog and to your cat and to your rats? What happens to their fur? It starts to what? It starts to expand and get stronger, doesn't it, and get thicker. Every one, it never forgets a rat. How could you ever assume it could forget you? It never forgets. It never forgets. Source always knows. Don't presume to tell it something or that it's forgotten. What you're going through, what struggles you're having, what's missing are all because you have aligned with that kind of thinking. And finally, when you approach Source, approach it with an awareness that it doesn't need you to love it. God doesn't need you to love God. God isn't worried, in my opinion, and I have the mic. God doesn't worry. God doesn't need you to love it, doesn't need you to build temples for it. God doesn't need you to chant to it. God doesn't need you to love God. God, I believe, Source, the way that you show your love for Source is by taking the love that you emanated from and loving each other. Share, give. Source is for giving. The way that you show your love for God is to extend that love that is God, that is you, everywhere.
For me, it's been a state of just allowing it to come to me. I've never chased after things. It's like, I shouldn't say I never have. I don't any longer. I did at one time in my life, and I found that the more I chased, the more I tried to grasp, the more I tried to make it happen, so the more it would elude me. But when I would just let go and have a real clear vision of seeing myself serving in some capacity, that whatever it was that I needed would just show up. I don't know if that's helpful to you or not, but getting that inner picture for yourself is, and getting it to, being more at peace with it is, because so much of our energy is around shortages and lacks, and I don't have enough, and I'm not going to make enough. It's all about me, me, me. When your focus is off of that and onto serving and offering and allowing and creating, the phone will ring. Something will show up in the mail. Somebody will call you and, or see you and say, you know what, you'd be the perfect person for this place. When somebody comes up to you and says, why don't you apply here? Or what, and you think, well, that was just a coincidence, or I was looking for a job or whatever. But that isn't. That's the way the universe works. I think that's how God works within us. When we're at peace, when we're letting go, and we're not trying, in the Tao it says, let yourself be lived by it. Instead of you living it and trying to do it and conquer it and be in charge of it, let yourself be lived by it. Relax, let go, go within, and just know that whatever it is that you need to be doing at this moment, it's all in divine timing. It's all perfect. There's nothing that's not going to work out for you. I don't know. That's always worked for me my entire life. I've never had a shortage of jobs. I've always had more offers than I could handle. Job hunting has never been a difficulty thing for me, and so I'm not always a good person to talk to about it, except that it's, I've always just had a knowing that whatever it is that I find interesting or exciting or passionate or moving or motivating or whatever, that I know within me that there's a way to make a living at that. It isn't just something that I find of interest. It doesn't make any difference what it is. It's like I tell my son Sans, who's going to be 21 on October the 9th, and he just got back from a trip to Indonesia doing surfing, and he's in school, he's in college, he's up at the University of Central Florida, and he's doing fine, and, his whole life, his whole passion, everything about his life is this surfing thing. I mean, he just gets up in the morning, and he checks where the waves are all over the world, and, when you watch him on a surfboard, it's totally his passion. And I've told him so many times, you don't have to go to business school, you don't have to go to college, if that's not, especially now at the age of 20, if that's not what you want to be. That feeling that you have of being on a surfboard and riding that wave and being at one with the ocean, all the excitement, the energy. I mean, he talks endlessly about it. It's just, it's his whole life. I said, there's a way to make a living at that. Just begin to imagine yourself as being able to do this, and still, whether I'm teaching other people about it, whether I work in a surf shop, whether I start my own surf shop, whether I do surf lessons, on a beach, whether I make surfboards, whether I study oceanography, whatever it might be, whether I get on one of these boats and learn how to, be a captain on a boat that takes surfers around. There's endless numbers of ways to, when you see surfboards and you see people out there surfing, somebody has to make the boards and somebody has to teach them. And I said, it's like, follow your passion, follow your bliss. Know within, this is what excites me. This is the thing that turns me on. And if it is, and it doesn't matter what age you are or how long you've been doing what you've been doing, I have men in their 40s and 50s say to me that, well, I can't change professions now. I've been doing it for 25 years. I said, well, who decided that you were going to be, say, an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is? Well, I decided that when I was 18. I said, and you're now 50? Would you go to an 18-year-old and ask that 18-year-old for advice on what you should be doing in your life? And I said, well, of course not. That's ridiculous. I said, well, isn't that what you're doing? You're allowing an 18-year-old to decide that because that's what you decided a long time ago, but your passion is pulling you in this direction. Listen to that bliss. I think it's a real important lesson. I got to tell you this. I had one of the most beautiful experiences, and I've been doing it with every chapter of this book that I'm writing, Excuses Be Gone. With every chapter, before I start the next chapter, and there are 18 chapters, I go out to this place. It's about 30 miles, maybe 35 miles from where I am on Maui, on West Maui, and it's a waterfall. And this waterfall comes down, like about 50 feet or so, and there's a pool there. And I go into this place, and I stay under this waterfall, and I let the water just cascade down on my head. And in those hours that I spend out there in that peaceful, beautiful place, everything I need to know for the next chapter is there. I don't have an outline. I don't have any organization. I don't have a suit and tie. I don't have any... all of the accoutrement that we have, that we believe is associated with a job, is all gone. And I'm out there in this beautiful, blissful place in the middle of this jungle, and it's a rainforest, and it's the most beautiful place in the world. And I come out of there, and it's almost as if God wraps his arms around me and says, this is what you'll need to do for this next chapter. Just go in there, be at peace. And when I leave there, after a couple of hours of being immersed in nature and finding my own nature in there, I come back here and I sit down and I write, and everything just flows so easily and so beautifully. You follow your bliss. You just allow it. And everyone else thinks, well, that's crazy. You're driving 35 miles, then you have to hike 2 hours into this place, and it's so isolated, and you go out there. And I said, I wouldn't even begin to know how to start a chapter without making conscious contact with God. And that's how I do it. It's just my way. Mm-hmm. But it's not the way. It's just my way. One of the things that I've practiced my entire life, I call it thinking from the end. And it's getting a vision, a picture in your mind of this project that you're involved in as being completed. Even with, do you have a title for the book?
No, I don't. I don't have a title at this point.
But it doesn't matter. Just make one up, anything at all. And then make it into a book cover and put it around another book and put it right there in your writing space, wherever you are.
That's a great idea.
So that you see it. I've done this with every book that I've done. But that's only the beginning. Let's say the book title is My Life in Vancouver. Okay, so you write My Life in Vancouver. You put it on there, and you put this not just there, but then you make posters and you put it in convenient places around. You put a little picture of the book itself on your dashboard of your car, so that you're constantly. So you're now projecting yourself into. So what I'm encouraging you to become here is to be what you wish to be, to become it. And then what you do, and this is the important part, is, and now that you've seen it and you see yourself as working from that perspective and you see it as completed, you go within and you experience the feeling of what it feels like to have this thing completed. All right? So can you describe, if you were able to hold that book in your hand, just use your imagination now, and you're holding the book in your hand, it's the first copy of the book. How do you feel? How do you feel looking at it?
I feel very satisfied. And as someone said earlier about something else, she felt as if she had actually given birth when her book was published.
Yes, I've had that feeling many times. I know it. So you would feel complete? You would feel freer than you feel now because you wouldn't have the anxiety of having to always be worried about this?
Yes.
Yeah. So that feeling state that we're talking about, feelings come from our thoughts, is the state that you want to go to. And then you have to really be religious about this. You have to keep your attention on that feeling. Like, this is one of the things that I've done to overcome illnesses and things in my life. It's like if I've got something going on in my chest, or I'm worrying about something in my stomach, or, whatever it is, as you get older, these kind of things crop up, and you just want... But what I do is not only do I project myself as healed from this thing and the illness is gone, but I project myself into how I feel, how good it feels to not have this backache, to not have this stomach ache, to not have this stuff in my chest. And I just go to that feeling all the time. I go to that feeling state. I go to that feeling state. And I've been able to just eradicate almost any kind of thing. And, you know, a guy named Neville, Neville, I think, Neville, he wrote a book called The Power of Awareness, which I just read. I just reread this week. And he talks about that, like, completely and thoroughly, that the key to achieving what you want in your life is to be what you wish to be it, but not to be it in thought, but to be it in feeling, to go around all day long feeling the completeness of that and to stay there. And as you do, you won't have to do anything. You'll just be guided to it, and the writing will become automatic, and it won't be a hardship, it won't be a burden, it won't be anything that you're struggling with. You'll be, as Lao Tzu say, you'll be allowing yourself to be lived by it, to be lived by this. Because this passion that you feel, this excitement, this thing that you have inside of you that says, I've got to write this book, I've got to complete it, and it doesn't matter what it might be to all of you out there listening. It just happens to be that for you, Annie, it's a book. That passion is really the presence of God within you. And as you live from that passion, from that place, and feel it, so all day long, that's why you want those reminders all the time. You look at it, and the minute that you look at it, oh my God, I feel so good, I feel so complete. I've actually written a book, and it's being published, and here it is. And as you feel that way, you align yourself with Source, and then all of the help that you need will be guided and directed to you.
If you want to accomplish something, anything, you must first expect it of yourself. And I mean, if you're writing anything down, or if you're tattooing anything to the inner forehead of yours that you can remind yourself of, ask yourself, what do you expect of yourself? You know, and do you expect to be ordinary, or do you expect to be extraordinary? And one of the things I believe is that when you're on your right path and you have passion for what it is that you do, that the universe conspires with you because you're aligned with source energy. You become part of the creative process. And the creative process is God consciousness.
I think probably the best thing that any of us can do for other people's lives is to model what it is, that we would like other people to be able to achieve for themselves, to be a human being who is walking the talk. I call it living the virtues, and I'll talk about that again tomorrow in the seminar, and I talk about that quite a bit in the film. And looking at people who didn't have as many things as so many of us, the rest of us have, and the emphasis was on volunteering and serving and reaching out and getting your thoughts and your attention off of what's in it for me and how much can I get and who can I defeat and how much better am I than everybody else and how much stuff have I accumulated and how many awards do I talk about and how much do I always speak about myself and so on. And shifting, making that shift. And the shift is away from being so self-centered and so ego-driven into reaching out, asking the question, how may I serve? Is there anything that I can do for somebody else? Becoming volunteers. Because there's nothing in this world that makes a person feel better and feel more God-realized and more on purpose when you're off of what's in it for me and onto how may I serve. And I think the interesting thing about that, and that's one of the reasons that I did the film, is that when you put your attention and you take the attention off of yourself and you put it on how may I serve, it's almost as if you align with something in the universe that is doing the very same thing. And instead of when you say to the universe, give me, give me, give me, or when you say to God, give me, give me, give me, I need more, it's almost as if you align with that kind of an energy, and the universe responds back to you with more of, you give me, give me, give me, give me, and you always feel under pressure. You always feel like you're never arriving. But when you say to the universe, when you say to God, when you say everything and everyone that's out there, how may I serve? It's almost as if the universe turns around and responds back with, how may I serve you? How may I serve you? And all the things that you used to chase after and try to get a hold of and worry about whether you're going to have enough of them and so on, all of those things seem to just dissolve, and the universe begins to say, how may I serve you? And the more you serve others, the more it serves you, and the more that arrives in your life. You don't have to chase after it anymore. It's sort of chasing after you. When I do reach out to other people, I am taking care of myself, That's what I'm doing. That's the thing, because what does it do? What does it do when you reach out and serve another human being in any way? All it does is it makes you feel good. And one of my teachers, Swami Muktananda in India, had an ashram, and he would ask people as they walked into the ashram, do you know the difference between good and God? And when he would stop and they'd say, what? And he'd say, and he'd just make a finger with, he'd make a circle with his finger and his thumb, which is zero. It's like, meaning there's one little zero, one little O. And that the answer is, there is no difference between good and God. That when you are doing something good, I mean, the opening lines of the Old Testament say, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, and all that God created, I think it's line 31, and all that God created was good, which means that God and good are one. So that feeling good and doing good and reaching out in that sense is really feeling God. And when you feel God within you, when you feel internally, when you feel the presence of a divine assistance or guidance, you're totally, completely taking care of yourself. You're making yourself feel good by reaching out and extending it to others. So that would be my answer to it at all. But the other thing I would always say is, even if people do say that back to you, I always say don't complain and don't explain. You don't have to explain. You know what you're doing. And the more of that you do, the more that seems to come into your life. That's just always worked for me. I don't know if it's true for everyone. And they say of the highest spiritual people, like Jesus, for example, that when Jesus would go into a village, just his presence in the village, because of the energy at which he lived, would be enough to elevate the energy of everyone in the community, or in wherever he would be. You've heard people say, well, don't be a Pollyanna, right? You've heard this over and over. What is a Pollyanna? Well, Pollyanna was a little girl who lived in a town, and everybody was gloom and everybody was down, and she comes to town, and as a result of her enthusiasm and her excitement, you remember this? Everybody starts feeling better, and all, because when you've got to, what you have to do when you're around that low negative energy, instead of saying they're bring me down, is reinforce the importance of not joining that kind of energy and presenting that, and then by staying in that place, not explaining yourself, not complaining, not finding fault with it, but just generating and sending out more and more of the kind of energy you're speaking about, you'll suddenly see people coming up. And you know who you'll notice it first? You'll notice it with little children, and you'll notice it even with animals. Okay. Because Patanjali put it this way. He had this wonderful line. He said, when you are steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm, that's judgment, directed towards yourself and others, that all living creatures will cease to feel fear in your presence. You just have to stay steadfast and just watch. And so you get the negativity, and instead of joining it and going down, you hang on to that and you watch. You'll start bringing those people up, and you'll never complain and you'll never explain.
Let me read to you one of the great ladies, one of the great writers ever. Her name's Lillian Smith, and her writing is so profound. This is what she says. She says, to pray, it is so necessary and so hard. Hard not because it requires intellect or knowledge or a big vocabulary or special techniques, but because it requires of us humility. And that comes, she said, I think, from a profound sense of one's brokenness and one's need. Not the need that comes and causes us to cry, get me out of this trouble, quick, please, God, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself. It comes out of our brokenness. The need to be related to something bigger than our puny little egos, to be connected, and that's a sense of brokenness, broken from spirit, broken from the return trip. Tao is the way of return. It's returning to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. And she says, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself, something more alive than oneself, something older and something not yet born that will endure through time. That was Lillian Smith writing in the introduction to The Journey. That out of this need to overcome this brokenness comes the afternoon of our life. Comes this time when we say, my connection to God, to Source, to Tao, to universal mind, to spirit, to that from which I originated, from which I can never be disconnected, which is who and what I am, my own divinity, it's never too late to teach that. And it's never too early to teach that. You can do it with your babies. This is why I've got two little children's books, two wonderful children's books. One's called Incredible You, and the other one just came out, it's called Unstoppable Me. So now we enter this thing, this change, this something takes over for us. And this thing called a quantum shift or a quantum change in our hearts takes over. And once it does, there's no going back. So now, well, let me describe first the quantum shift, the quantum change. When you make this shift, when a quantum change takes place, when it takes place and you move from the number one priority of your life being to get good grades, to fit in, to be a good daughter or a good mother, or to fit in with your family business or whatever it is that it might be, when that shift has completed itself and you now realize that there's something greater, something grander, something more profound. In a book called Quantum Change, they suggest that when these things come into your life and the shift is on, that the experiences are so dramatic that they often are accompanied by voices that we hear and an energy that we experience in our life that no one else knows. Here's a friend of mine. His name's Bill Wilson. He was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said these words about this, it's called the mystical type of quantum change. He said, "My depression deepened unbearably, and finally it seemed to me as though I were at the bottom of the pit. I still gagged badly at the notion of a power greater than myself." That's the ego at work. "But finally, just for a moment, the last vestige of my proud obstinacy was crushed. All at once, I found myself crying out, 'If there is a God, let him show himself. I am ready to do anything. And suddenly, the room lit up with a great white light. I was caught up into an ecstasy which there are no words to describe. It seemed to me, in the mind's eye, that I was on a mountain and that a wind, not of air, but of spirit, was blowing. And then it burst upon me that I was a free man.'" A wind of spirit.
I did a film called My Greatest Teacher, which was a story of my relationship and trying to find my father. And it turns out that what he did when I was a young boy and all of his horrible, crass behavior and so on were really the impetus for my being able to reach to higher and higher levels. And while you're reviewing that and looking at that, of coming at it from a place of brokenness, come at it from a place of completeness. You know, Joel Goldsmith, in his book, Parentheses in Eternity, once said that in the presence of the God realized, that the laws of the material world do not apply. So that if we're able to reach this place of God realization, where we're in alignment with the source of our being, where I just call it thinking like God thinks, which is what Einstein's famous quote was. I don't care about the details. I just want to learn to think like God thinks. Like whatever the source of being, even if you're an atheist, there is a source of, there is an invisibleness from which all visible things originate. I mean, the greatest scientists on the planet will tell us that, and then in the Tao it says very clearly that, that all being originates in non-being. So whatever that non-beingness is, the closer you get to how you think it acts and feels. And it's very interesting because when I wrote a book a few years back called The Power of Intention, it was that idea, that principal idea, that there is a way for us that intention isn't something that we do through the ego. Intention is a field of energy from which all things are intended. And if you can stay aligned with what that is like, then that's when the miracles take place. And I've done endless programs and lectures and so on, and contemplated this stuff in front of very large audiences and on tapes and so on. Right. And basically, what I feel is that as you elevate your consciousness, as you begin to remove the influences and the power and the draw of the ego, and begin to substitute your inner mantra shifts to how may I serve and what may I do for you, your false self less and more about just serving, then that's when the miracles, that's when healings take place. That's when abundance begins to show up. That's when, that's what they said even of Jesus. I mean, when he he was God on earth. I mean, like Buddha, and in the presence of that kind of realization, even death itself couldn't survive. Even illness can't survive. That,
wow.
Like the story of Lazarus, in the Bible, because of that consciousness. That
Right.
when you're in the presence of that consciousness, death doesn't exist because there is no death. I've said so many times, and I just talked to a girl whose mother died last week, and she was just so upset about it. And I was saying, you haven't grasped the idea that she can't really die. She was in a little baby body. She was in a toddler's body. She was in a teenage body. She was in a 20 and a 30 and a 40-year-old body. She's been in hundreds, thousands, a new body every single day. And the body keeps changing and going
Right.
through the process of decay and death, which we all go through, growth, decay, death. But who she is, her isness, whatever it is that keeps being in these other bodies, is no different now than it was when she was 12 and when she was 18 and so on. And that part can't die. And when you get that, when you really begin to realize that, that's when these kinds of miracles that I've spoken about so often in my life, when, the idea that when you put we call it a coincidence, but, when we have a thought and that thought is so aligned with spirit and it's not focused on what's in it for me, that the manifestation of that thought, the physical manifestation of that thought, begins to take place. Thomas
Right.
Crowder talked about this in the early part of the 1900s. He said that when you begin to contemplate in the same way that God contemplates, then you gain the same powers that God has. The ability to create, the ability to manifest, the ability to heal, the ability to have things happen for you. That's what happens as you start contemplating your life, not from the perspective of how the ego does, like how much more can I get and I'm competing with others and so on, but you begin to contemplate in terms of how may I serve, how may I offer, how may I, be able to reach out. And as you do that, and I know I get so excited when I think about this topic, that even the least among you, as Jesus was saying, that I'm no different than you. He says somewhere in the New Testament, is it not written, like in the Old Testament, that I have said that it is said that you are gods, that we are all gods, that we are all pieces of God, we are all fragments of God. And as we think like that, the least among us, and I think what is referred to as the least, and remember, we're talking about interpretations here. Who knows what the
Right.
least means? So that's just some translators, use of a phrase that was uttered thousands and thousands of years ago. I would assume that to be what you said, that the feeble among us, those that will inherit the earth, becoming the observer to your life. It's like my teacher in India said that don't take your life so personally. Beginning to become the observer to your life, and as you become the observer, you begin to notice that these miracles really do occur. That the things that St. Francis was able to do. That birds would come and just land on his shoulder. I've had butterflies come and just land and talk to me.
The incredible power of passion and enthusiasm, and when you get it in your hearts, and my objective in the short time that I have here with you today is to convey that to you. What you need, what you're supposed to do, how it will work out, what financing is required, what people you'll need, what circumstances you will need to align with the stars or whatever. All will be taken care of if you stay with your passion. And I'd like to suggest to you that whatever your passion is, and even if you don't know what it is, whatever the feeling you have inside of you that says to you, this is what you're here for, you have to do this. As absurd as it may sound, as ridiculous as it may appear to everyone in your environment, including your husband and your children and your wife and your ex-wife and your grandchildren and your neighbors and the people you work with and the people you encounter everywhere you go. It may sound like the most absurd thing for someone of your age at this time, given these circumstances of your life, to be even contemplating something so crazy, whatever it might be. And yet, if you can hold on to the passion, just hold on to that. Hold on to the passion. What you're doing when you're holding on to the passion is you're holding on to God, because the word enthusiasm and passion are the same, and theos from the Greek is God. Yasm means within. Enthusiasm is the God within you. The God within you. And this voice, if you read The 10 Secrets for Success and Inner Peace I put out for my children several years ago. I wrote it for my teenagers because I put down in there the 10 most significant and important ideas that I thought they should know long after I was gone. One of those ideas was the second one. It's called Don't Die with Your Music Still in You, that you came here with music to play. So not dying with your music still in you is a very important idea. It's one of 10 that I carried with me for a long time and wrote it so that they would have it and be able to read that and know what I was speaking about. But beyond that is something that I have come to know, and that is when you have that passion and you hang on to it and you don't let any obstacle come in your way, you're hanging on to God. And another synonym for God is love, right out of the New Testament. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. So now we're looking at enthusiasm being something, or passion being something that relates to your staying connected to a field of energy that is dominated by something called love, and that is God itself. And we all have this wonderful choice as we come into this world. And the choice is whether we're going to stay aligned with that or not. I got this idea, and I never know where the next thing is going to come from. And it's why I say to you with absolute certainty, when you have the passion, just the presence of the passion and nothing more, that's all you need, just the presence of it, is a guarantee for you that you have the capacity to manifest it, attract it, and create it in whatever form you would like it to show up. Just because you have the passion, because it's a knowing within you. And when you stay with it and align yourself with it, the book you have to write, the music you have to create, the artwork that you have to do, the child that you absolutely must adopt, the business that you have to open up someplace out there that no one else understands or grasps, the thing that won't go away, the thing that won't go away. When you keep it there, when you stay aligned with it, and you keep that alignment in harmony with God, with Spirit, whatever you need will begin to show up. The problem with most of us is that as it begins to show up, we then institute the thing that keeps us from formalizing and manifesting and creating the destiny that we signed up for. Things like doubts. Shakespeare said, our doubts are our traitors. These are traitors. These are things that we live with and we hang on to and we spout and we talk about, and we don't realize that in just the most innocuous and innocent of ways, we are keeping ourselves from a destiny that we signed up for long before we ever entered into this world of form.
I've always believed that if you follow the herd, you'll end up stepping in poop, you know. Because the herd leaves a lot of stuff behind, and you find out you walk through your whole life and wonder why this stuff's on your shoes, it smells all the time, your life isn't working, and very often it's because you are not listening to the inner spirit that tells you exactly what you're here for and why you were here and why you showed up. I was in Philadelphia doing an hour there for QVC, and I got an invitation to go to the art museum there in Philadelphia, the Museum of Art. And I went over there and I spent about 3 hours going through 7 or 8 rooms all filled with paintings of this very famous Spanish artist who died in 1989. And here was a man who had come into the world. He had this capacity for painting. It was a talent that he brought with him, that he showed up here with. And yet he had a father who was very adamant about the fact that he shouldn't be painting, and did everything that he possibly could to dissuade him from it, ridiculed him, told him that he would never speak to him again, that he would disown him, that he would have nothing to do with him if he were to continue to do this painting. And I was thinking, if this artist, whether you like his art or don't like his art, and some of it is phenomenal because he became this huge activist back in the 1930s when during the Spanish Revolution, the Civil War in Spain, with Franco and so on, he took a side there on the side of the people, and really, his painting reflected it. Then when World War II came along, he had some of his most famous paintings were the anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler kind of things that were really expressed in art. the rage that he felt about what was happening in Europe and around the world. And I was thinking that I must have looked at, 500 or 600 of his paintings and sculptures and work of art. And if he had listened to his father, if he had listened to somebody else and done what the herd or what everybody else, what he was being told to do, that we wouldn't have this great artwork to look at. And then I got to thinking about almost all of the great work that's ever appeared in the history of man, whether it's artwork or music compositions or great buildings, and so many of our terrific writing and so on, and including my own life. I mean, I had many people who told me that you can't make a living writing, and you should go out and get yourself a real job. In fact, my own mother, who's going to be 90 on her next birthday, keeps asking me when I'm going to get a job, and I'm 64 years old. But there's always been an inside of me, an inner calling that said, this is what you're here for and what you have to do, and you can't do it by being employed by somebody else. I've felt and I've said many times that you'll never have complete and total freedom as long as you're working for somebody else. I mean, it's like there is an element of knowing that you are in charge of your own destiny, and that you set your own time schedule, and you dress the way you want to dress, and you show up the way you want to, and that we all have the capacity within us to do it, and many, of course, don't opt for that. The really creative people out there in the world who've been great contributors in this world are people who've listened to that inner voice and said, look, you know what, I'm going to paint anyway. And it turns out that Salvador Dali spent many years being on the outs with his father, didn't even speak to him, and much of his rage toward his father was reflected in his earliest paintings back in the 1920s and early 30s. So I think there's something really to be said for listening to what it is that you know you're here for. That's what I call being in spirit or inspired. And when you're inspired, everything seems to work for you, and you're not doing what other people have dictated you to do. And I'm always mindful of the people who have, it's always intrigued me in my talks, the people who really get to the top in any field, whether it's, athletics, or whether it's sport, or whether it's, artwork, or whether it's composition, or anything. It doesn't make any difference what it might be. The people who are considered to be they often will tell you that they had a calling inside of themselves, and they listened to it, and other people attempted to dissuade them. I can't tell you how many people, I got a D on a paper from a teacher that I had at Wayne State University when I was a freshman. I was 22 years old. I'd already spent 4 years overseas in the service, and had been all around the world. And I came back and was just starting out as a freshman in college. And my freshman English teacher's name was Joachim Ries, R-I-E-S. I don't know if he's still around. And the reason I got the D was because he said the quality of the writing was too good for a freshman English student. You must have plagiarized this. I can't find out where it is, but I don't accept that you could have written this. And by that time, he didn't even know that I'd already written a novel, and I had written probably 150 essays, and had been doing writing since I was a young boy. And if I would have listened to him and been told that you can't be a writer, or you're not, and I can even remember, when I was much younger than that, being told that I shouldn't be spending so much of my time reading and writing, and I should be out there doing other things. But you have to listen. You have to listen to that inner voice.